Panel, if I were to stand behind the veil of ignorance and ask myself, is this a world I want to be born into? I reach the same answer every single time. No, because this is a world of a dying civilization. How are we to define a dying civilization? What's the burden for us in today's debate? We say that it's not our job to predict the end of the world as we know it, but rather the end of civilization as we know it. So how would this be defined? We would say that civilization is such that you have a community where everybody respects at the very least and at most loves each other and has a respect for the law, where you have a sensible and reasonable social contract with the government, where the government effectively allows you to have the right to a dignified life, right? We define the end of the civilization as we know it at the point of which you no longer meaningfully have the access to that dignified life. And we prove to you in our debate how this is the necessary, how this is almost certainly happening now and is going to continue happening further and become worse. Firstly, how do people actually feel right now under the status quo and how it's going to get worse? People right now feel like they have been failed by the government. Whether it's elective or not, they feel like they have not been represented adequately. They feel like their interests have not been prioritized. They feel like their dreams and their pursuit of their subjective preferences have been undermined and unprioritized by the government in favor of interests for corporations or personal goals for these politicians. What does this look like? It looks like because the government is rather not appealing to them, but appealing to corporations for a few reasons. Firstly, insofar as a lot of these parties, their candidacies live and die based on the donations that corporations allow them to have, they are far more incentivized to actually help out these corporations through the use of favors, basically allowing them to, for example, suggest regulation within their field of work, within their industry, or rather give them a heads up if regulation is coming up so that they can be better prepared. It also looks like the ability that they know that there's going to be a lack of options in terms of candidacy. This looks like, for example, in the United States, where you have two parties, one that's center-right and one that's very far right, and you only meaningfully have these two options in the government that you can vote for. And since neither of them does a good job of actually being helpful for the public, and because they are so institutionalized and entrenched within the political system, which we think is the norm in the vast majority of states, they know that neither side is going to meaningfully appeal to the actual electorate. So they can afford to not appeal meaningfully themselves. And finally, in terms of capacity, at this point, insofar as so much power has been given to these corporations, insofar that a lot of them even have the ability to outsource workforce from a different country that has less labor rights, what exactly can you do to punish these corporations if you are the government, right? And in many of these states, their constitution is written such that the protection of the free market disallows them from making really progressive policy that can actually punish these corporations so that they can gain some utility for the electorate. So there's a lack of capacity. There's also a lack of incentive. That is to say that insofar as a lot of these candidates are beholden to these corporations, then insofar as corporations are very good at being able to bribing them legally, and so for example things like lobbying, or most popularly furthering the careers of these politicians inside of politics and outside of politics, getting a job as consultants in these businesses, we think that there's a massive incentive, even if the capacity exists, to not actually work against these corporations and not really care so much about the electorate. They care a little bit, but not so much that it's meaningful, right? So what is the actual result of all of this? It's also the fact that people feel like they're under threat. Whether you feel like you're under threat because of climate change knocking on your door, ending your world and ending your children's world, whether you feel like you're under threat because the job opportunity isn't what it used to be for your parents, because housing market has gone up and owning a house now is more expensive than it's ever been, because education means that you are indebted for the rest of your life, whether it is you feel under threat because you might actually literally be targeted by the government if you are a minority or a marginalized community or even an immigrant, right? And this just isn't happening in only states that are developing or only states that are undeveloped. This is a trend that you see all over. That is in states like India, America, Hungary, everywhere. This is really important because it leads me to the third mechanism. That is that people are now more polarized than ever. Insofar as the rise of populism can literally be seen as people basically looking for a reason or something to blame for the world that they live in now being less utile for them than it was for their grandparents. This exists in a few ways, right? Insofar as I want to blame something for the condition that I'm in now, and there's a lot of people who feel this way, you create a mob mentality. And the problem with mob mentality is that it never actually ends up creating like reasonable conclusions. Rather, you end up blaming people. This looks like in the UK, for example, with the rise of people not being very satisfied with the conservative government and how they represent them during austerity, blaming immigrants and voting to leave the EU when it probably wasn't the best thing for them. And this is what's really important, is that one of the reasons why they voted for the EU, two things happened, right? One, they voted against their best interest as the population and the electorate. But secondly, they also blamed immigrants and they basically targeted their hate misguidedly towards a minority and a marginalized community, which is very, very problematic, right? And then finally, insofar as like you are the minority and you are the marginalized community, you also feel targeted, you also feel attacked, you also want to lash out. This looks like, for example, in Budapest, the rise of like LGBTQ plus protests because the government decided to outlaw any messaging around that subject. You feel like you are being targeted and attacked, so you lash out. What do we see here? We see a lack of respect for a government that isn't representing you. We see a government that doesn't in fact respect you at all. And then finally, we see people lashing out. And we think that this actually can come up in very dangerous ways in the future, right? We don't think it's surprising that when Luigi Mangione kills a person who is benefiting off the suffering of individuals in the healthcare industry, people are very happy. They have no respect for a law that isn't actually there to protect them. We don't think it's surprising that the rise of eco-terrorism comes from a sense of self-defense. That is, that these corporations are actually engaging in a harm unto us that we need to be able to relieve ourselves from. So we lash out in such a way that we get to stop them. And why not? At the point of which lobbying has failed, at the point of which the government has stopped listening to you, at the point of which all non-violent means have been exhausted, why not lash out? We think that the lack of respect here for the laws and for the ability to do this is actually something that's going to bring us closer to the end of civilization. But finally, on the rise of populism, note that so much of this blaming on one another happens because we just don't have any reality where we have shared truths, right? What my uncle who has like fascist leanings believes are very different to what I believe as someone who's like slightly more progressive, right? We don't live in the same world in our heads, so we're less likely to respect each other and we're less likely to see each other as equal. For all these reasons, civilization is coming to an end and we ought to just enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will start my speech now. The government brings up many points, many incidents, many examples of things maybe going rather badly in various parts of the world. And it's difficult to disagree with some of these, so that's not what we'll be doing here. I have to remind you that the motion we're debating is something with an incredibly high burden of proof, because we disagree with the framing of the government here. What is the end of civilization? It is not a worsening of civilization. It is not a decrease in the amounts of civilization present in a society. Rather, it is the total and absolute extinguishment of anything that can possibly be labeled civilization. It is the absence of such a thing. This is the burden they need to prove that this will happen in the next 100 years. And in these arguments here, I'm going to explain why that will not be the case. First of all, because climate change is and will be under our control, and even if it's not, we'll survive it. Second of all, because nukes and mutually assured destruction will ensure that nukes cannot have the capacity to destroy us in any meaningful way. And third, because things are in fact going well, even if the news media and other sources that like to dramatize events assert that this is not the case. Now, first of all, I'd like to do a few rebuttals. Apart from the fact that we disagree with the framing here, we would say that the example of opening government, of politics becoming worse, is a good one for us to attach onto. Because really, even the worst case of terrible politics is still civilization. I mean, think back to the Sumerians, think back to the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. I mean, people had barely any rights, right? Apart from the upper classes, the clergy, the nobility, workers and peasants were slaving away on the fields. That's still that's still worse than even the worst case of the US government potentially in the future. And that can still be labeled civilization, and it is labeled civilization. Go ahead.
At what point would you say that when the government has infringed on my rights and the majority of people's rights, even if some people have some rights that are recognized, would you call that the end of civilization?
No, we believe that as long as there are people who are interacting with each other on a regular basis, who have particular rights, it doesn't have to be the entirety of the class of people, but who have particular rights, who have obligations towards each other, converse with each other, and exist together in compact, we believe that that is civilization. That is what needs to be extinguished in order for this motion to show true. Now, I want to go on to our own arguments here because there are a lot. First of all, we anticipate that someone on the government bench may talk about climate change and how that could extinguish civilization. However, first of all, is climate change such a large threat? I think not. I study energy transitions, and what we're seeing on the day-to-day is that things are accelerating quickly. Installations of solar, batteries, and hydrogen are accelerating at an unprecedented pace. We're seeing a new sort of law in which these things are becoming exponentially cheaper and at the same time exponentially more efficient, for example, in the case of solar panels. So is carbon capture, for example, which is also becoming widely available and reducing emissions from oil and gas, which are the biggest concern when we're talking about climate change. Eliminate emissions from oil and gas, you eliminate the risk of climate change, and this is what we are on a path to do right now. So we see that green tech is superior. Even governments who are critical of it will accept it eventually. Solar and wind is just cheaper than oil and gas. And, well, market forces have to dominate in a world that's dominated by market forces. However, even ignoring this, even assuming climate change will manifest, is this significant enough and sufficient enough to collapse civilization entirely as we've defined it? No, of course not. Humans have survived multiple ice ages. We are sure that human civilization can also survive a little bit of global warming, even a lot of global warming, if they move to habitable spots, habitable places, and in the next 100 years, there's no such risk of this not materializing. Not right now, sorry. I want to go on to nukes. It's a very important point as well. This is one of the largest threats, or so people say, to civilization right now. Why is this not a threat though, or not as the way that the news media represents it? Think back to the Cold War, right? So much tension, so much strife all across the world. But in the Cold War, things were very tense. Are they as tense now? Can we honestly say that? Can we honestly say there are proxy wars going on all over the world, not just in Ukraine and not just in Israel as well, but all over the world, really in South America, in Afghanistan, for example? No, we can't say that. These big powers are no longer confronting each other as directly, even contrary to what the Cold War would imply, as they were back then. And in addition to that, there's less nukes there, 80% less nukes than at the height of the Cold War. We're trying to argue here that if a nuclear war didn't break out during the Cold War, one of the most tense periods in human history that's not at all parallel today, would it break out now? We believe there's not enough evidence given for the fact that that will occur. And in fact, even if we assume that it could, we like to think that dictators, even dictators, democratically elected leaders, we can assume will not use nukes. They care about their countries, they care about their people, or at the very least they're supported by their people, and their power originates from it. But dictators too are self-preserving. We can never assume that an individual human being wishes to die. That's an incredibly high burden to assume that someone has a death wish. But a dictator is so self-preserving that they will never end up using nukes. We believe that's very, very, very clear, even for someone like Kim Jong-un. The next point I want to make is that things are generally going well in the world. Even if in a significant or in a little situation they may be going badly, there's no end in sight for all of civilization. The life expectancy of human beings is increasing. Wealth is increasing globally, in poor countries and in rich countries, maybe less so, but all the same. And tech is improving, making progress. AI is improving and making lives and livelihoods better. And populism, which the government seems to be so worried about, well, it's not a symptom of autocracy, it's in fact a symptom of democracy. You can't have a functioning democracy without some degree of populism. So really, if they're so worried about autocracy, perhaps they should embrace some degree of populism here. What we're trying to say is that things are going in the right track. People are also getting more intelligent, and a little trend in what's happening right now doesn't determine the future. We believe in the resilience of the human race and human society. As we've said, we've survived much worse than what we're going through now. Much more war, much more strife, much more environmental catastrophe and disaster. And we believe that the case right now does not provide a tipping point for saying that this will be the end. That this, after 40,000 years of persevering everything, of fighting off everything that we could, will finally be enough to end the human race. We believe we've shown there will be no significant climate change, or if it will be, we can survive it. We've shown that nukes will not destroy us through institutionalized, mutually assured destruction, and we have shown that there is a trend upwards in society of intelligence, wealth, life expectancy, and a general feeling that the human race will survive every sort of strife and civilization will remain, at least in some form, intact. Thank you.
Panel. In a world in which social collapse is imminent and irreversible, we must therefore weigh the points we see before us to discern whether what the opposition claims is incremental to what we are showing. They claim that in the monarchs we were undergoing tougher times, we have been resilient and we overcame the worst possible scenarios. However, it is shown that we are becoming sadder, we are becoming more paranoid, we are becoming more and more negative towards what the power system brings us. And therefore, there is no incentive for the government to change, there is no incentive to bring us to the world in which we can be resilient. We are just discouraged by what is brought before us, and with the increased education that we have received as the opposition provides, we are now able and willing to take a stand and change everything, which will therefore bring a collapse in civilization. So what am I going to talk about in my speech? I'm first going to deal with some external refutation brought by opposition, and then I'm going to go talk about how the government is inherently bad and how the stakeholders in this scenario are all brought down in a negative way. So the opposition claims that as long as the elites have rights and as long as the elites can protect themselves and they are maintained, then that is civil. But to what extent is degrading and corroding minorities and targeting marginalized communities and even now the middle class, because now this gap is widening and we no longer have these distinctions. To what extent is that civil? To only prioritize the elite and ensure that they are protected, because now we're seeing that the lower class citizens are under severe oppression and therefore are known to want to act against it. So practically, they have rights, but what can they do with these rights? There is an increase of inflation and therefore a decrease in purchasing power, so they can't really do anything with what they have. The climate change scenario in which they want to change something, but no one is changing anything, is causing people to protest extremely, to put oil in water, to burn down buildings, to decrease the resources available to us. They're quite literally burning institutions and burning everything to the ground. And we characterize this as a decrease in civilization because it's hard to maintain democracy when we burn down the parliament for not caring about us. It's hard to maintain structure when the structure is being physically and practically protested and burnt down to the ground. So now let's move on to the main points about how the government in itself is not acting for us, but acting for itself. So it is very important to note that the actors we have in government are placed as not reasonable. And let's put it bluntly, they're complete morons. We see Trump in office, we see people who aren't supposed to be there, who are corrupt, who only care about their own ideological endpoints, who only care about what they want to achieve. We see Trump, who was impeached but is now back on the top of his power. We see that they think they're the smartest, the most untouchable people in the room, and therefore are driven mad with this power that therefore drives them away from the people, away from the society, which makes us lash out, which makes us act, and therefore act against, due to a rise in populism, we have engaged in dangerous behavior, both by the public and by the government. Again, we see that these people like Trump figure themselves as untouchable, so they can keep committing crimes against the people. They keep exploiting the minorities. They keep outsourcing Chinese, Bangladeshi workers for lower wages, for lower employment. They keep exploiting the people who are in need of help. And there's a significant decrease in the dignification of human rights that opposition just simply doesn't address. To add, this is inherently bad because due to this rise in populism, we are no longer able to access a dignified life. And it is due to an increase in the government and the disconnect between what the government is doing and what the people want it to occur. Yes, I'll take the PR.
If you're defining civilization by the level of government and how good it is, would you say that the Spanish anarchical commune in the 30s was not a civilization?
The civilization as we know it today is something that would give rights to everybody or as long as we say it, appeals to the mass majority of masses. As long as there is people protesting the civilization, there's going to be an ultimate or irreversible goal for the people who are being oppressed to change this oppression. And this is not only the people who are in minorities or marginalized groups, but also majority. So where we see the right wing in America, and we see them voting for corporations that will support minimum wage. And why? Why do they do this? Why do they support things that they inherently believe to be bad? It is because they are angry with what is currently happening and they demand a change. That is why Republicans vote Republicans. That is why some Democrats vote the way that they do. And that is because they're losing a sense of right to dignity. And because they're losing this right to dignity, they tend to vote against what is currently happening. And this will always lead to an irreversible outrage in the government. Yes, I'll take a
Don't you believe that actually protests and action, as you've been describing in this way, is actually a part of civilization? I mean, it's people interacting with each other in that sense and you know, making relationships with each other and engaging in democracy.
So far as these relationships with each other end up burning parliamentary buildings, to what extent can we say that it is civil to have a community brought together to try tear down the government? As long as we continue to tear down the government, we tear down the civilization in which we have structured and we have framed. In our side of the house, we claim that the social collapse is irreversible. So the civilization as we know it today, in 100 years, is going to degrade. And there is no doubt about it. There is no possible way in which we see or discern any way in which something that is currently happening today won't change, and it will change for the worst. And this is due to the increased paranoia, this is due to the socioeconomic inequality and industrial collapse, and this is due, as my first speaker mentioned, due to the power, inequity, and inequalities brought upon the world as we see it today. And that is why we strongly propose this point.
From opening government, we get that we are living in a terrible world, that we are heading towards a time of despair and uncommunity-like societies. First of all, as my partner has explained, a society or a civilization is a civilization, and claiming that you don't agree with their values is not the same as claiming that they are not one. But even if we do agree with your framing, this world where, do you think that in this world where the past 1,000 years or 2,000 years has focused on development and newness and leaving repressing values and fighting for our growth of our society? Panel, do you really believe that OG's is the likely outcome of this little trend of Gen Z depression? If the reality sucks so bad, how do you explain birth growth rates? And how can people actually choose to keep living and keep striving for a better future? As you explained before, these forms of protest and fighting for your rights, this is a depiction of hope. It's a depiction of hoping for a better day. It's a depiction of why we have this ability to strive for a better future, and that's what we want. And as for obligation, which was a pretty strong case, in your extreme world of science fiction, reminding us of movies where people get abandoned on islands, even there is obligation, right? So you have obligation for your family members and for your friends, and if we do go back like 1,000,000 years in history, you still have obligation for your hunters that are really good so they can gather food for you and supply to you all your biological human needs. History has shown us that, so I don't agree with that. Also, history has shown us that disagreeing with your government is a natural way of leading to change. In a world where we have no hope, as you said, there would be no protest and no striving for a better future. There would be no hope. And this hope that you portray in your speech proves the burden that human instincts for survival are real, and why we as a society and as in the general of the world will do everything to survive and prevail and strive for a better future. Exactly of the opposite of what OG was trying to claim. Okay, so, conspiracy theories, fake news, populistic approach, all of these making the audience believe that the situation is way more dire than it actually is, which is what my partner has explained to you, right? He explained what the situation looks like in reality as for global warming, nuclear wars, science, and tech development. We will explain to you why all of these are signs to why the society will prevail, will lead to a better future, and why it will be the extinction of this will not be in the near to 100 years. Yes, closing, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Do you think Hitler had strong survival instinct when he started World War II?
I actually do think he had strong survival instincts when he started World War II. I do not think that the outcome that came out of it was his plan or his wishes at all. I think that I don't think that this is relevant to this debate so much, but I do think that in his way of doing things, he believed that he was doing what was best for his community, for his society, and for the world. And he did have a survival instinct. He did whatever he thought was true. Okay, cool. So, global warming, right? This is like this huge headline that's been over our heads for forever. The glaciers are melting, fresh water is running out, the ozone has holes. This has been going on for forever, and my partner has explained thoroughly why the views on these topics are way more dramatic than they actually are, and how we as a society are preparing ourselves to deal with these situations, when the situation get maybe a little bit more dire, right? So our technology and our scientific fields are leading expositions and fields of research on how to deal with these situations. This is what we are focusing on how to deal with situations where the situation gets worse. No. And all of this is part of our survival instincts, that we don't believe that OG has dealt with the burden of proving why we don't have one. And as for nuclear wars, it is true that they have been used before, right? We all know the story. And it is true that war is natural in the human being society. But we don't think that this comes against our argument of human instinct survival. At the end of the day, even leaders want people to lead, right? They want a country, they need people to lead in order to stay in power. So even if he was talking about extreme cases like dictators, it's not that they have any obligation for their people. No, we don't think that. We think that they're terrible. But we do think that they need people to lead in order to have more power, more money. And more people to lead means that they need to strive for the fact that they will survive. And as we said, surviving is what we are trying to prove here, right? The surviving of the civilization for more than 100 years. As for the development of the tech and science, actually, yes, PY.
So, insofar as institutions fail, either because they fail to do their job or they are destroyed by the people that they have failed, how does civilization survive the destruction of these institutions?
We think that change is a very, very natural thing in the human history. We think that values change during history, during different governmental governors, and during the change of just the geopolitical situation. We don't think that change is something that represents depression, oppression, or the non-want to continue the life that they are living. We actually think that is exactly the opposite. It's the strive for a better future. It's a depiction of hope, as I said before. Okay, so life expectancy is only increasing with every passing year, right? Because we have better scientific solutions and better medical fields of finding new solutions, sending them out to third world countries because we have obligation to other countries. And as for running out of resources, which is a fine point, my partner has explained why the technology is actively pursuing and implementing alternative resources-based energy, whatever. Just look at Japan and what they did with their panel and movement energy on the sidewalks. The solutions are here and they're immediate and they're being implemented right now. So, to conclude, we can reasonably assume, and I think we've proven quite well, unless you prove otherwise, that no individual wants to die. And this self-preservation also affects the global leaders in their actions, both in protecting themselves and their countries, and in developing science and technologically in order to deal with the upcoming problems that they are definitely aware of. We are not the only ones in the world aware of global warming. We are prepared and we have just survival instincts. Civilization will prevail.
Okay, so first of all, I want to give a slight reframe to what OO gave as definition for the end of civilization. We agree that the end of civilization is something very, very dramatic and acute that completely and utterly changes the world. I want to frame it slightly differently. What we see it is a real huge change of the world order and life as we know it today, complete and utter change, and small change, really big change. What I mean, there's no functioning society in vast majority of the world. Of course, there'll be like maybe 10 people sitting together. You could call it society, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, like big corporates, about like universities, stuff like that, banks and all of that. Like, we think like the big establishments are like don't exist, like banks, universities, like music, art, like they maybe exist to a very small extent, but nothing global, nothing like a city, nothing that looks like that. Okay. And like, we also think it will have to involve a death of large percentage of the world. That's like end of civilization is not a very big part of the end of the world. That's the way we see it. We think it's the end. And mostly, and also there's no, like, we agree with OG on that, like there's no trust in some global system you believe in, no beliefs in countries and stuff like that, the dismantle of countries. Now note, these things don't have to be permanent for the end of all times. Like even if you go into like an ice age, it goes on for 400 years, we think it's the end of the civilization. It doesn't have to be forever, right? It's still the end of civilization. I mean, it's stopping the continuity of that. Okay, so that's like that's the way we see it, so it's very important. So that's a very likely case for this. Now, my case is simple. Nuclear war. I'll explain to you exactly in detail what will happen. First of all, I'll tell you why it's very likely we will see use in a nuclear weapon, like use, I'm not saying in the next 100 years, okay? And then I'm going to show you, given such a use, why we're very likely to go into escalation that will lead to nuclear winter. Given that, I will explain to you why this leads to my definition of the end of civilization, okay? Let me start. So first of all, why it's very likely we'll see use with nuclear weapon in the next 100 years, okay? As Ochi characterized and OO agreed, there's a lot of tensions these wars. There's this polarization, terrible wars in Ukraine versus Russia, India and Pakistan, Israel and Iran. There's many countries that are in deep wars right now. They're like much worse than the Cold War, I gotta tell you. Sure, there were dictators, but there's actual war, hundreds of thousands of people dying worldwide. That's something that was unheard of. And second of all, let me explain to you what this is likely can cause. So the first mechanism which will lead to like use of nuclear war is that dictators are in danger of being impeached, right? A lot of dictators these days have weapons. You said, oh, they don't want to die. But if the alternative is being dragged out on the street, they will likely use a nuclear weapon. It's much more likely, not now. I'll take in 5 minutes. Okay. Let me explain to you, I'll give you reasons. So Putin, Kim Jong-un, China if there's a revolution, Iran. There's plenty of examples that are very likely, and there might be some in the future that have nuclear weapons and they're in danger, right? So they will prefer to attack a different country to self-preserve. If like the people are rioting on the streets, why not use a nuclear weapon? I can go to sanctuary. Everybody, like all the citizens will be terrified if they see a use of a nuclear weapon. They'll go back to their houses. It will likely start a war. So there's no time to go protest. You have to protect yourself from dying. So the leadership is still intact. And also those dictators might want to destroy civilization if the alternative is being decapitated on the street. They'll want to destroy the world as we know it in order to self-preserve. And look, the difference and the like unique mechanism of like nuclear weapon is that with a push of a button, and many of these guys have no regulation on like actually pushing, it's very easy for Pakistani leaders to just push the button. They will simply just like use the weapon and kill millions of people, alright? So, and also, why likely emotionally? Being a dictator, you have to be a sociopath as it is. You have to be selfish as it is. You don't care for the will of the people. You want to survive. We got it from both sides of the house. You have to be crazy. And dictators went to wars from their own interest, knowing they can die, even here. But now they have nuclear weapons that make it very dangerous. Second mechanism, not now. A misunderstanding, okay? Given a war, we explained there's many wars right now, given a huge war, there's nuclear heads sitting in submarines, right? A misunderstanding has almost happened, by the way, in the Cuban Missile Crisis and second time on the USSR in the middle 80s. Like, it was very close to happening. A misunderstanding can cause like somebody to push the button with no communication. These submarines have no direct communication. So a misunderstanding can make this start a war. Thirdly, terrorism. Given such dictators even fall in Iran or in North Korea, they have those nuclear weapons. And sure, they require technical abilities, but these people can like take a dirty bomb and implode it anyway and cause like a use of nuclear weapon. So you don't like have to be an expert, and that's also very likely. Okay, now I want to go into POI. Yeah.
In the past 100 years where there already have been nukes, the only time that they were used was to stop a war, give people some credit.
Okay, so I'm not giving credit because the difference is back then there were no crazy dictators, as I just explained to you. It was not the same. They had dictators who did not have nuclear weapons. Like Roosevelt was not a crazy dictator back then. Now we have crazy people who have less mechanisms and they have 5,000 nuclear weapons and they can completely and utterly kill everyone on this planet like this, or almost everyone. Okay. Now I want to explain to you why, given a nuclear war, we'll get to escalation to a nuclear winter. So first of all, there is a second hit strike. So for all the strong countries, such as the USA or Britain, given that they were attacked, or NATO were attacked by nuclear weapons, they can go and have a fest. That's what they need to do in order to protect themselves, right? If they got hit with a nuclear weapon, let's say by Iran, and Russia sees this and see the US did not respond, they can be very aggressive and they know they won't get retaliated. Because of this, they will have to respond, and that's like the code of use. You should respond. That's the way you should use nuclear weapon in order to ensure your survivability in many of these countries. Now, thirdly, I want to make sure why it's likely. Now, given an attack, let's say on NATO, say they hit Germany. They don't have a nuclear weapon, but it will involve the entire bloc. There's countries united together in NATO, in BRICS for Russia. So they have other countries involved in there, and so it's very likely they will drag different countries. So let's say India and Pakistan will use a nuclear weapon. China will get involved because they'll be scared, and the US will get involved because of that, and that will cause many uses. Okay. Now, what I want to make sure is that the countries that will be attacked are the strong ones, right? It's the economic center of the world, billions of people, places where there are establishments, and where most of production is made, most money is. So when these countries are attacked, all of these pretty much cease to exist because they got hit with nuclear. What will happen? No stock market, no governments because of that. It's like a state of emergency. The government is in asylum. There's no communications because all the cell lines were shut down by it. This will create nuclear warfare, nuclear winter. So there's no production. There's a huge climate change, right? And huge and utter panic in the entirety of the world, even Africa. People will be scared. They'll run out of cities, and they'll disintegrate society for all these reasons. Please don't destroy the world.
First thing I want to do is give you a characterization of civilization which would completely outframe everybody else. We heard multiple definitions, and I want to explain you what our definitions is the one which is correct. Firstly, OG explained it as civilization as we know it, but in info slide we clearly see the civilization dot. So that means civilization as a whole must stop existing, and no civilization as we know it, no civilization as we are used to it. Civilization can be drastically changed, civilization can collapse, civilization can reduce and change drastically in many ways, but it will keep existing one way or another, and it will be still called civilization. So that completely pushes their case and their characterization out of the debate. We mostly agree with what our opening opposition mentioned, but we want to narrow it down even further, and we want to give you a definition which is every two humans interacting and passing down knowledge and experience and everything accumulated for the past existence of the human existence is considered civilization. We have, as my second speaker will better address it, we have many examples of prehistoric, of ancient existence of humans, which we consider civilization, even though they are nowhere close to what we know today. So even if we get reduced to that amount of people, the way they were governed or anything else, it is still considered civilization, and because of that our frame is the only correct one. Who gives this definition of civilization integrity? Every historian, every humanitarian, every sociologist gives it. So because of that, I want to move further to my speech because I think I explained that good enough. Now, how we will ensure continuity of civilization no matter what happens? We have one completely new mechanism which gives us advantage over any other team in this debate. So, what we basically believe is that civilization is firstly capable, and secondly that people have incentive to, even if something catastrophic happens, and even if some major crackdown on civilization starts happening, we have way and motive to make one kind of Noah's Ark in the space, in way of having one big spaceship
with many people of it, who will one day return to Earth and rebuild civilization from what it has been reduced to. How? First, sorry, I have big burdens. If I had time, I will address your question. Thank you. First, I want to explain you why this is very possible and very realistic. We have already a lot of ways, and we already had examples like International Space Station, which was built 40 years ago, and which was in space for multiple decades. Even in their worst scenario, which is nuclear winter, which is something which completely complicates life on Earth, nuclear winters last, in the worst case scenario, 10 years or 1 decade. So I believe space station we already had has been in space for longer than that. So with current technology, we can only make better ones which will be better. Okay, how is it possible and how we guarantee that we have capability to make better spaceships now? Firstly, we have a mechanism of accumulating knowledge. So we had to go through multiple thousands of years to go from one kind of metal in source to another, but we had to got like 1/10 of that time to go from that next kind of metal to nuclear bombs. We see radical expansion in technology in last 30, 50, 100 years, and it only keeps rapidly expanding. So the way technology develops is exponential. Thank you. Next thing I want to mention is, just a second, I want to mention that to characterize people who have capability and who are in the first lines of these technological advancements, and why they have incentive to save people in this way. And people who have incentive to do this are ultra-rich people who have capabilities, who have ways to make spaceships, to make space exploration. As we already see, we have people like Musk who has his own space company, we have Bezos who has his own space company. But I don't want to characterize them as either good or bad. I just have to characterize them as people who are capable of making really big and really powerful and really high quality spaceships. Why would they do this, and why would they save civilization? Firstly, they have survival mechanism for themselves, and if they have a way to save themselves and their family, they will do it. But much better if they find a way to save civilization as whole, as we defined it, for the rest of human existence. They will be seen as saviors. They will be seen as people who save civilization as we know it, or in any way. For that instance. Later. And for that reason, in scenario, they will be known for the rest of history as somebody who has saved civilization. Why is this important to them? All these successful peoples and all these people who are capable and who made it this far into their careers have huge egos. They mostly care about themselves and how are they perceived in public. And being perceived as people and as a single human who has saved the next. Yes.
Yes. All those very kind and wanting individuals, how will they be able to actually stop a nuclear war?
They won't have to be able to stop a nuclear war. Why? They only have to be able to be capable to send a spaceship in the space safely. How can they do this? We already have examples of cities on Earth which are literally untouchable. If you take, for example, Tel Aviv, which has Iron Dome, which is the best defense mechanism on the planet Earth, and that city is literally untouchable. You cannot tell me that countries who have the same amount of technology as Israel, for this instance of the Tel Aviv has, will not use their defense systems to save that one spaceship from exiting the atmosphere. Because of that ship will certainly make it out. When those people return to Earth, they will have multiple ways to rebuild it. They have all their accumulated knowledge. They have the seed walls across the Earth, and many other motor factors for rebuilding civilizations are already being sealed in big bunkers. Exactly, for instance, of something major happening. We are not just doing this, we are here by this mechanism, making safe and making sure nothing can danger the civilization, be it pandemic, be it natural disaster, we just save.
Yeah.
Okay, panel, we easily take this debate, okay? We easily win this debate. Basically, we have here two main clashes. We have the main clash, I think the meta clash, I'll call it, about what civilization looks like and what is the actual meaning of civilization. The second clash is more specific and it's only about our case, basically. It's about the likelihood and the effect of a nuclear war. But before that, I want to first make some external rebuttals to CO. Now, CO told us that that if we have nuclear winter, we have it only for a few years. Now, even if it's true, I don't think you understand the implications of a nuclear winter for a couple of years. Okay, it means 10 years without food because we are not able to grow food without light. It means 10 years that basically we have no science, we have no resources. But people have to survive somehow without food, and after like many bombings all around the world that really mitigate our way to survive. So basically, even if we are talking about 10 years, it's still very, very harmful. And yeah. Now, regarding spaceships, I think no, not now. Regarding spaceship, I think first of all, it's not clear to me why it's likely that we are going to have such advanced technology in that state that we are going to build like full and huge colonies in space to such extent that we are going to have a civilization there that is able to support the whole civilization. It's just not analyzed enough. Why is it likely? And I think that like intuitively, it's not likely at all. Even if we have spaceships, as I'm going to talk, we might have like a couple of hundreds of people on space, and I'm going to say why is it not considered a civilization. Regarding like iron domes and way to prevent nuclear wars, so and nuclear bombing. So currently we don't have those, don't have the technology, not now. And it's not clear to me from CO why are we going to have this technology before that. It's not clear to me why can't I bypass it with like technology to like complicated atom bombs or just like many atom bombs at once that are going to completely that you can't really handle. So for this reason, I don't think that CO really has a case here. But let's move on to the clashes, and during which I'm going to rebuild a little bit on what my partner said. Now, the first question is the meta-clash. This debate is about what civilization looks like. Now, look, we are not talking about worsening of human situation or improving of human situation. We are talking about a civilization, not about individuals. Okay, basically, so first of all, that means that the OG case about like people have less trust in establishment is not important. Is not in the motion at all, because basically we already have, like in Israel, only 10% of people support. Only 10% of people have trust in the parliament. It doesn't mean that they don't obey the parliament. It doesn't mean that they don't follow its rules. The parliament can govern without like this form of trust. But anyway, what is a civilization after all? A civilization in our case, we basically take what Orwell said, but a civilization in our case demands an establishment that can govern a society. Okay, that means that let's take what CO said about every human can be every interaction between humans is a civilization. Well, let's take an analogy here. Let's imagine that we have two people in a desert island in the middle of the sea, and they are talking a little bit about sports with each other. Is this a civilization? I don't know why. Yes.
You strongman my case. What I said is two humans passing down the knowledge accumulated over the past human existence.
Okay, so why is this a civilization? Okay, I think it's much more likely to require establishment for civilization, some kind of organized society. And in this case, we're the only one that actually proved to you that we are going to lose this form of society. Let's go to the second question, which is basically about our case. Now, first of all, I'll do a little bit of rebuilding and impact into Yoad's case. What will happen once? Okay, I think that you had pretty proved to you that we are going to have, that there's a large likelihood for a nuclear war, that there's a large likelihood to have a mutual destruction, and actually all considered because they said people want to open wars because of this idea of mutual destruction. They concede that mutual destruction is very likely once we open the war. We added the required burden that says that this is actually a likely case, not now and not at all. This is actually a likely case that a nuclear war is going to begin. Now, but a little bit about the impact of such war. If you have such war, first of all, we have a nuclear winter. I already explained about it. It means we can't grow food because we don't have sunlight at all. Okay, we have a complete winter. We can't grow food without seasons, and basically that means that the resources in the world are very, very limited. So first of all, it's going to be an eradication of many people. To an extent that we don't really have an establishment because we don't have enough people to form a functioning society. We don't have enough resources. People are going to fight over those resources. We are going to have a world with a lot of wars, and basically a war full of chaos because people are going to fight on these resources. Apart from that, once we have bombings, even if those even if those bombings are not all around the world, but let's say specifically in problematic places like Europe or the US, basically it means that we already destruct a main column of human civilization, because now we have less, because these places contain many resources that we can't really have if they are not contained, and it means that governments are going to break down because basically they need people, and there are a lot of zones that are not accessible, so government cannot have authority there. Basically, this is what we are going to get, and I think that's sufficient to prove that it's likely that we are going to have the end of civilization, because I showed you that we basically have people fighting on very limited resources, and that means basically that we are going to that they're not going to form a civilization together. Now, regarding rebuttals that we got from OO, they said that nuclear wars didn't break so far. Well, it's not a case anyway. It doesn't prove anything. But we think that it hasn't. But it wasn't dangerous by now, because only now we have very powerful nuclear weapons that are able to destroy complete areas of land, and not just Hiroshima. Sorry. Now moving on to the less nuclear weapons is not relevant. Sorry. A bit about leaders. I think that the main argument about self-preservance is completely false. We already explained a little bit about it, but let me quote Putin here: "If Russia doesn't exist, the world should not exist. Such people only care about their own country, so if they are threatened, they are going to fight back with nuclear weapons." So basically, we prove to you that the world is going to end due to nuclear wars, and it's very likely. Thank you very much.
First, what I will do is I will rebuild our case and explain why it is very likely. Well, first of all, the burden I want to reinforce is that the spaceship that we talk about is a very realistic thing. First of all, what the closing government doesn't take into account at all is that not the whole world will blow up at once. The nuclear winter takes like a year to ensue. In between that time, Elon Musk can literally take his spaceship to Haiti and build a farm, and I don't know, whatever. The point is they have the time to prepare, and yeah, they will do it. Secondly, these people we talk about have a lot of money. They have resources to build, to bring food, to bring everything. And the third part that is very important is that this is a reality. Elon Musk made a spaceship that is able to land once it has launched, and so we know this technology exists and it will be likely to be used in this circumstance. The second part is why, okay, it's very obvious why they want to do it. They just want to die. They have Elon Musk has 15 children. They don't. They want to reproduce. They have all these things. Okay, so let me respond to CG attacks to us. They say that we have 10 years no food. A very simple mechanism that can be implemented is that they build a simple small farm that grows wheat, or they can build how do you say this? Obor, with pigs, to grow pigs, to kill them, to have food to eat. Secondly, they say spaceships have only a couple of hundred people. This is, first of all, enough to be able to reproduce, but I will reinforce our frame and explain why that is still a civilization, and secondly, why those 100 people will last and reproduce. Okay, so yeah, they say that a civilization is determined by the establishment. So, as in my POI, I'm going to offer you a counterexample that directly contradicts this. In the Spanish commune, there was no establishment, no one was governed by a central government, and everyone would still intuitively consider this a civilization. And secondly, I think the main problem with their case is that they consider every government in the world is going to fall, except for the nuclear war. Okay. Secondly, I think villages where the hand of power of the establishment doesn't touch them can still be considered a civilization, even though, I don't know, whatever, they don't have the government pressuring them. And third of all, that organizations are inherent to people, and therefore there is no authority on them to decide what is an establishment and what is not, because someone will always give orders, someone will take them, and whatever. Okay, so let me reinforce our frame. No, thank you. Okay, so my point is that because defining civilization in this debate is very difficult to agree upon for everyone, I will bring intuitive examples that will define it by quality and not by quality. First of all, okay, so we get from the opening government and the opening opposition this defining by solidarity. I think a civil war, which we would all say is still a civilization, did not stop being a civilization because people are fighting. I think that directly contradicts it and destroys their whole case. Secondly, as I explained, the anarchism. Thirdly, I don't think the level of destruction of a society is a good metric, because we have post-World War II Europe, which was completely destroyed, nothing was working as it was before, but we would still consider it a civilization. Okay, so let me directly explain why we are different from opening opposition and why the frame is much better and more better defined. So I think even if they did a good job, they have an internal contradiction in that from the PM we get that he says what defines a civilization is like rights, obligations, and coexistence. And then later, the DPM said that values don't determine a civilization. I think this is in direct contradiction with each other, and we are just, because it is impossible to prove which values are correct, we are just saying it is inherent to the human race to be civilized. The point is that any two humans that are able to reproduce and that have a culture can be called a civilization. First, because people want children and will therefore reproduce, but, okay, and if we are going to define civilization not by our intuitive terms, but by technicality, like what is defined in the textbooks, civilizations don't come into existence at the complexity level. We have pre-agrarian civilization, industrial civilization. This has nothing to do with technology. This is all inherent to the human race. The pre-agrarian civilization had no establishment. You need to take this into account. The only thing that defines it is like parts of culture. They have language and they have some sort of technology. Okay, another burden I want to prove is that these 100 people won't kill each other. So first of all, if they get to land, there is so much space on Earth after the 10 years they will be able to populate it. Secondly, they are very traumatized by the events of this global war. They saw that, probably someone close to them died. They don't want to kill each other again. And like it is very intuitive. The biggest pacifists, writers and intellectuals are people who went through World War I. I don't know, like Hemingway or something. The third of all, why are they not likely to kill each other? Well, the first part, the mechanism is they really have no incentive. Something like an incentive would be scarce resources, but since we explained that they have like a year to prepare and will be able to make enough food, they will not have that reason to kill each other. And secondly, they know that civilization dies if only one... Okay, whatever, say. Yes.
We prove to you that the effects will be also in Africa, where everybody runs away for a long time. There's dismantlement of society. Why is that not the destruction of
Okay, the fourth part of this burden is that an insane amount of testing will be done on people you trust. They will not kill each other because, not on people you trust. First of all, it can be people you trust who you trust, they will not kill you. And secondly, you can like do psychological testing on people to see if they are crazy. Okay. So I think that directly outframes the opening government, because first of all, they have to prove that every government is bad, and secondly, they have to prove that every government in the world will collapse. I say if Haiti survives, civilization lives on, like it isn't determined by stuff like that. CO, we directly clash with them because they say nuclear war. Yes, we say nuclear war, but we will run away and civilization will live on. And opening opposition just doesn't have an adequate definition of civilization, so you can buy their case. They don't even have a, not adequate, they don't have a precise definition. So I think their cases are just They are clashing on which is more likely, and we are saying this will 100% happen because all of the incentives of these people, how easy it is to do, and yeah. So vote CO. Thank you.